do me a favor, but just kind of like scoot in just a little more, act like you guys are friends, just so I can see like how close you're gonna meet it up.
Hey everyone, I hope you're having a great 4th of July week, not taking work too seriously, enjoying your cookout, setting off some fireworks, and having a few glasses of your favorite brown water along the way. Just a little bit of updates. Patreon shipments will begin soon for those that have hit their 6-month mark at the end of June. I've been spending some time working my Excel spreadsheet magic, and I'm continually improving the system. And we're also going to be doing our giveaway for supporters in the month of June as well, so stay tuned for that. And I'm also working on a way for our supporters to order Bourbon Pursuit glassware online whenever they want, or they can order it with their barrel picks. We've got a lot of great things happening behind the scenes, and we're looking forward to sharing those with you all very soon. In the meantime, you're going to be getting your weekly dose of bourbon guests and industry knowledge from these great people. Over a year ago, the vintage spirit law went in effect here in Kentucky, and we had talked about it before, but now it's time to really see what's become of it. Today's show features two opposite sides of the spectrum. We've got one side doing the retail with Justin Sloane, who runs Justin's House of Bourbon in Lexington, and the other is an on-premise at a restaurant with Larry Rice at the famed Silver Dollar here in Louisville. Both of these places are known for having unique bourbons, but this time we get an inside scoop into how this law has affected their business. And lastly, we get a chance to actually hear about their greatest dusty hunting stories too. You're gonna love it. As usual, if you love the show, make sure you support us on Patreon. We've got a lot of cool things that are happening through there, a lot of good things to give away too for your support. T-shirts, koozies, bottle totes, barrel picks, that even more they're gonna be announced, so stay tuned for that. And also follow us on your favorite social media channels, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And as always, make sure that you are subscribing on iTunes, YouTube, Facebook, or wherever you get this podcast. Make sure you're hitting the subscribe button. With that, enjoy this week's episode. Always find what you love at Total Wine & More. With so many great bottles to choose from at the lowest price, it's easy to find your favorite Cabernet or a new single barrel bourbon to try, with some help from one of their friendly guides. And with every bottle comes the confidence of knowing you just found something amazing. With the lowest prices for over 30 years, find what you love and love what you find only at Total Wine & More. Curbside pickup and delivery available in most areas. Visit TotalWine.com to learn more. Spirits not sold in Virginia and North Carolina. Drink responsibly and be 21. From their bar to yours, Chad and Sarah of the popular YouTube channel It's Bourbon Night bring you their favorite at-home old-fashioned mix with the new Elemental Elixir's Golden Hour Syrup. It's a custom-made syrup with notes of bold black tea, warm spices, and orange zest. All you need is your favorite whiskey and ice. No bitters needed. One bottle makes 16 drinks, so that's only $1 a cocktail before you add your own whiskey. They can also be enjoyed in other cocktails or spirits, mocktails, coffee, tea, and anything you can think of. It's crafted locally in Lexington, Kentucky, and you can get your bottle now at whiskeyambitions.com. Do you ever pour yourself a bourbon, swirl it around, and then start struggling to come up with tasting notes? And perhaps you're also looking for a good Father's Day gift idea. Well, you can now solve both with a kit from Knows Your Bourbon. And unlike other nosing kits on the market, Knows Your Bourbon kits feature real ingredients for the most authentic aromas. You can smell real Tahitian vanilla bean instead of some synthetic aroma that's just made from chemicals. So head on over to knowsyourbourbon.com and enter code BP10 for 10% off your order.
Play Whiskey Wednesday, Round 11, the memory game. Until June 26, each week you could win one of our 12 incredible grand prizes. Select $2 at checkout. And if they match on drawing night, you'll win that bottle. Not a match? No worries. You still score a Weller 12-year. Every $5 ticket gives you 5 chances to win, including 4 weekly bonus prizes. Get your tickets now at give270.org. Charitable Gaming License ORG 0002703.
Ed Bly and Rising Tide Spirits are back again with a new release of Old Stubborn Bourbon. And this release of Old Stubborn is a premium hand marriage of 10, 11, and 12-year cask strength, barely filtered pot still bourbon. It comes in at a staggering 123.8 proof. And the flavoring grain for this one, which the last one was wheated, but this time it's now rye. Rich, sweet, and bold with a long finish that's sure to be another eye-opener.
You can order online at Sealbox or thebourbonconcierge.com, and you can even purchase in person at Revival Vintage Spirits, and even now with very few select stores in Kentucky. You can get it now while you can, but be sure to do it because it's not going to last long.
Welcome back to the episode of the Bourbon Pursuit Podcast, the official podcast of bourbon. Kenny and Ryan on the road today.
Yes.
Got to go through some rainy weather, but we made it. We've got a great show lined up. It's something that we've actually talked about before, even before we get into the word vintage. It was funny. We had a story come in here and we were talking about cell phones, and Ryan was on the phone, talking, doing business and stuff, and trying to figure out like where his guys are and how these things work. And I was like, do you remember vintage cell phones when people had like Nextels with two-way radios on them? And like everybody had that. Like it was funny, right?
Yeah, back when it first started, you dinged a guy across town, the Nextel. We thought that was like the latest, greatest technology. And now we can like watch people on iPads and, track them down. And it's crazy how it's changed. But
this is not vintage technology. We're talking about vintage whiskey today. And this isn't something that is a first for us. We've talked about it plenty of times on the show. We talked about it when the law was first going to effect. We've had Ed Bly on the show to talk about kind of what that means in his regard too. And this is going to be another interesting take where we're going to see from the actual business side, what is it, how is it done so far? Where is the future going? And it's not only that, it's going to be looking at from two different angles today, not just from a retailer side, but also from a restaurant side too.
Yeah, I'm totally, me, I love Dusties and all.
Just a little bit.
I can't like them as much anymore because they're just gotten so expensive, but they're so awesome. And I'm so excited about today's episode because I walked in here and we're at the House of Bourbon, obviously, but just walked in here and like saw all the beautiful vintage bottles, and so excited to see how everything's going since the law has been passed recently. So real excited about today.
Yeah, I mean, for anybody that is watching on video, so we're in the back room. There's sort of speakeasy tasting room, which is still sort of being finalized and built out, but it's a beautiful area, and the store is immaculate as well. So, but that's a great way to kind of start introducing our guests. So today on the show, we have Justin Sloane. Justin is the co-owner of Justin's House of Bourbon, as well as the Bourbon Review, and Larry Rice, proprietor of the Silver Dollar and the Pearl of Germantown in Louisville, Kentucky. So, gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having us.
So, as usual,
we practiced that.
Yeah, they were here before us.
Like all
so they've been like practicing.
you guys Skyping each other last night.
Yeah.
What are we going to say?
What are you going to wear?
So, before we jump into this, there's something that we usually talk about all our guests about is kind of like your entry into bourbon. Like what's your story of how you got to the point
that first bottle that kind of was just like,
that first bottle, that first taste, sort of what led you down there. Was it, growing up in Kentucky? Was it, your grandfather saying, come here and take a nip of this? Like what was it for you all? Larry, we'll start on you.
I mean, honestly, I don't think it was one thing, growing up in Louisville, it's just always around. Like I didn't have like a real reverence for bourbon when I was growing up, but I was drinking it.
Right.
And it probably wasn't until 15 years ago or so that I really started became my spirit, that I really just wanted to delve into the histories of and learn a lot about. Probably like everybody else at that age, the first thing I drank was either something like a Hiram Walker's 10 High, or it was Makers. And I didn't think much about it. Right. And I just drank them forever. And when you ordered whiskey at a bar, you just, once you got to be of age or had a fake ID, then you just assumed it was going to be bourbon or Jack Daniels probably. Those are the ones they give you. But it wasn't really until I started getting into cocktails that I really realized what a beautiful thing it was. Studying old classic cocktails, was always rye whiskey and bourbon were the two really, major components to those things. And so then I started really focusing in on bourbon. I thought I realized early on in cocktails that I'm not going to become an expert on everything at my age. So I need to focus. And so I was like, it makes sense to focus on bourbon, being from Louisville and running bars in Louisville, Kentucky. So it wasn't like an aha moment really for me. It was more of like a slow evolution,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cool. What about you, Justin?
For me, I grew up in a dry county in eastern Kentucky, so I was used to drinking the unaged whiskey. And I remember getting to college and had some Makers or I don't even remember. It's probably Makers was my go-to if I could afford it at that time. Drinking it, I was like, oh man, this is completely different. It's a completely different taste. It's it's sweet. It's got a better finish than the harsh white whiskey that I was drinking, probably under 21. But once I got into it, I started doing some of the collecting of the Maker's Mark bottles, and I remember a buddy of mine said, yeah, you should. I had one of the Maker's Mark Golds. You should try it. And it's like different than Maker's Mark. I was like, all right. Let's try it as a 101 proof Japanese export. I'm like, all right, this is completely different. So then it pushed me into trying to find higher proofs and going that route. And that's kind of where it's ended up today. Is like none of my grandfathers or that I know of drank at all. So kind of the black sheep of the family as far as the alcohol business now. So, yeah, that's kind of where it started.
I don't think you're far off in the fact that how many people we talked to that they said they really started getting into bourbon with these collectible Maker's Marks.
Yeah.
I mean, it just seems that
crazy.
It amazes me that that's sort of people's step,
especially around here, because how many Kentucky bottles do I have of collectors championship bottles or whatever?
Keeneland
Louisville Keeneland bottles.
Right.
There's so many of them around. That your dad probably kept some, and that's how mine was. And you'd be like, oh, there's a Maker's bottle. I'm just gonna pop open.
Well, it got you in stores and stuff looking for that kind of stuff, and then you're just like, whoa, what else? What else is there? And then start grabbing something else while you're there. And this was probably in 2001, 2002, something like that. So it's crazy. Some of my best friends in this industry is people I've met through collecting Maker's Mark or.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I guess we need to also dispel something and kind of talk about it too. Like, is there still value in collecting Maker's Mark, in your opinion? Like, be honest.
Negative. They're great bottles. It's great charities, and that kind of thing. But as far as return on investment or anything, then no. Yeah, not at this time, no.
I remember it had to have been when the Faro bottle came out and everybody was lining up around, Lexington and Louisville and getting their bottles. And then it was like, it's gone. And then probably I think the week after it was like, oh, there's a whole other shipment.
You can just keep making these.
Just get some more wax.
It's like that Knob Creek rare release of 15,000 bottles or whatever.
Yeah, there's plenty of it to go around.
Yeah.
So let's get a little bit into the meat of the show. The idea and the topic was to really start focusing on the vintage spirit law and really what it's meant to your business. And so, Justin, since you haven't been open as the longest Silver Dollar, kind of so far, what was the launch point of Justin's House of Bourbon? And I'm guessing this vintage spirit law was really something that really kickstarted it. Were you already in the process of doing this and you said like, well, shit, this is just good timing?
No, we are open today because of House Bill 100. We had no intentions of opening a package store. JT, my business partner in the magazine stuff, has a bar already. I'd kicked around the tires on a bar a few years ago, but I had no intentions to open a package store until House Bill 100 came to fruition. And once it came to fruition, once it got passed, once we saw the writing on the wall, what it was going to be, that's what said, okay, we can do this. We can do it here in Lexington. We can do it pretty quick. Let's do it. And that's kind of where it came from. It's House Bill 100.
Why did you think a package store would be the best way to capitalize on this bill?
I think that was one thing. It was kind of not, is easy to do for package stores already in business. For bars, it'd be kind of easy to just bring those in a certain amount. But when you're selling bottles, it's big ticketed items, kind of over the counter.
Inventory costs.
Big inventory costs, and we feel like we were the few that could do it to this scale. And, especially with as many barrel picks as we were already doing, with the Bourbon Review and Bell's, we felt like we could, just continue to ride that. We're doing barrel picks almost once a month now here. So, I mean, it's, and we've been open, a little bit now. So, But it's I mean that's what we felt like the package store was the best solution for us, because we could always
just because you had so much sitting inventory.
And we can always have an outlet for a bar if we wanted to do that as well,
right?
Which we still, they still may. But
is Bell's doing any vintage over there?
Not at this time, no. So that's kind of we're I'm working with JT and Larry Redmond to work on potentially getting some vintage stuff in there as well.
It's funny you say it, because I've noticed in liquor stores back home, nobody's really embraced this yet. Really, I haven't seen any. Ed Blythe's the only one really I know doing it, but it makes sense now that they would have a bigger upfront investment, to get the bottles in to sell them.
Absolutely, yeah. It's just it wasn't their business model to keep whiskey, to keep bottles. It was just to move it. So it's kind of retro, bringing it back in is kind of a great outlet for us anyways.
I think that new bill might change that too, where if that passes with everybody being able to ship, because then you got a bigger market. It's really tough, I think, to get enough people in the front door that want to drop that kind of money on a bottle, especially in Kentucky, because from my experience, we didn't grow up with a reverence for bourbon. We just drank it, and now all of a sudden bottles are worth $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 and keep climbing,
And you're talking to less than 1% of people in Louisville or Kentucky that can probably afford or even want to pay that.
Well, we have small populations, and the median income is not quite the same as like a New York or Chicago, where something like that you probably would have daily sales at levels like that,
And this always was, this package store too was always looking towards House Bill 400 and maybe down the road doing online sales altogether. But House Bill 400 is coming up for vote, I think this week or next week, something like that. And we're looking forward to that. We get calls probably from out of state and out of the country, more than we do in state, looking for vintage whiskey. And we can't do anything right now but tell them to come in the store.
Right. Yeah.
So I mean, hopefully down the road that opens up a little bit. But I'm looking forward to be able to if House Bill 400 passes, that we can bring them in here and then send them home. We've had a couple people leave without anything because they didn't want to risk putting
that was going to say
a bottle in their check bag, So, so we're looking forward to that too.
And so before we start talking about the target market who these people are, Larry, I kind of wanted to break you into the discussion too, because you kind of saw the writing on the wall really early, because anybody that travels to Louisville as a destination for the Bourbon Trail, we get the question all the time, like, oh, where should we go eat? Like, where's the great bar?
Get the chili Achilles. That's my brunch. I get the chili Achilles twice a month at least. It's fantastic.
And so we always say, go check out Silver Dollar. Like, you're just going to have a massive bar menu. They've got great food. So what was the idea of just starting something that was just completely focused on having pretty much every bourbon bottle that you can find on the shelf in a store, or even ones that are limited edition, behind your bar as well?
Well, so at the Dollar, we wanted to be really purposeful and not pretentious, I guess, because again, I came from like a kind of a cocktail background and still am. We try to do everything. And I worked fine dining in the 90s and wine. There was definitely a different attitude towards that. And I just kind of had I did have an aha moment in this when I was working at a restaurant, because I had people that I normally had as regulars at bars and restaurants I'd worked at that didn't come in because it was a higher end joint and everything was written in French on the menu and they didn't understand it.
Pinkies up.
Yeah. So we kind of made a policy that like everyone deserves to eat and drink well. So we took away that kind of verbiages and stuff. And then our back bar, we actually don't do every single thing that comes out. We try to specifically do only Kentucky whiskeys. So we don't have scotches and we don't have Irish whiskeys, and I love them. I mean, I worked in an Irish pub for 10 years and drank a lot of those things. But we wanted to really support the local distilleries, Kentucky distilleries. Now we do have a couple what I call asterisks, and if someone calls me out on it, then I'm cool with it. Because a couple of our ryes, like the Willet ryes that we had at first, and the Bullet ryes, were obviously from MGP.
Right.
And if someone calls me out on it, then it's somebody I know I can talk to about whiskey.
You can tell them it's bottled here.
Yeah. Well, and what I always say is, they're Kentucky families. that purchase their rye while theirs is aging, and so we still support that distillery or that house,
Where did the honky tonk aspect come from? That?
Well, so we had a third business partner when we first started, and it was a crews from Chicago used to come down all the time for whiskey picks and for just whiskey education. And I got to know some really good houses up there, some really good groups of like bartenders and restaurants. And we would all just sit around my house drinking at night and listening to records. And it would usually be old honky tonk music or, bluegrass. And we'd drink till the sun front came up, and then go do a barrel pick at 10. Like, I don't do that anymore. Yeah. But
we've done it recently.
And you know how like bartenders are, you're like, I bet other people would enjoy this too. And so we tried to do like as much of what we were enjoying in my living room at 4:00 in the morning. We tried to bring that to the public basically with And, I thought that's that whole story, that, Dust Bowl, like Bakersfield kind of thing is a very working man thing. And bourbon, for most of my life, was a very working man spirit as well. And obviously, Kentucky's blue collar, Crescent Hill there's blue collar, or Clifton. But so it all seemed to just make sense. You know what I mean? And my upbringing is definitely, blue collar or less. So, I just wanted it to be inviting. I wanted it to make sense for Kentucky. I wanted to showcase what Kentucky does, as well as some of the influences. I know that like obviously Bakersfield is not Kentucky, and that honky tonk's not necessarily, but it's stuff we relate to.
Right.
So, and then when the vintage law came in, like I've been not purposely collecting Dusties forever, but at first I used to just buy them and drink them and buy them and drink them. And then I started buying faster than I drank them. And so they would, we grew me and my better half grew a pretty decent collection at home. And then I got really aggressive about it when I started seeing how much other people enjoyed it, because it started getting more and more expensive. So then I really did start collecting, because I was like, I need to buy this shit before it's too expensive, And so we had a pretty good stash. Like everything we have at our bar actually just came from our house. Like we didn't, I didn't go out and start looking for it to put at the bar. I just picked out of our collection what we were going to move over there.
What is it about vintage whiskeys or Dusties you say that you'd like or enjoy or what do they bring to the table, you think?
Well, for me, it's a lot of things. Like, a lot of times it's just really fucking delicious, and that in itself is awesome. But when I first started drinking them, so about 10 or 12 years ago, a buddy of mine just sent me a bottle of like 1961, the Old Granddad decanter. He knew I drank a lot of Old Granddad. He thought it'd be a nice gift. I think he bought it on eBay for $70 or something,
Mm-hmm.
And
the good old eBay days.
Yeah. And it was friggin' delicious. And I was like, that's not Old Granddad that I'm drinking today, So I started wanting to try other whiskeys that I drank all the time and try them and then I got really silly about it, and I tried them in different decades. I wanted to try every different decade, and I wanted to do them in parallel tastings, and I wanted to see the differences. And then I started getting into the history of it, really enjoyed learning the histories and when it changes houses and the, different master distillers and stuff. So it's a lot of different things, and there's obviously romance to it as well. Like that's something that and I didn't really realize this was going on at first, but we have people over a lot at the house to drink that come in town. We're pretty tied into the bar community across the nation. When we're real familiar with folks, we'll have them to the house for drinks. And then like years would go by, and then I'd run into one of these bartenders that came with a friend to my house, and then they would remember exactly what they drank that night and exactly how it tasted, and I wouldn't remember. I just, because I've done that 100 times.
I do this every night of the week.
Yeah. Well, then I realized that
when you eat filet mignon every night, you kind of lose the taste for it.
but I kind of realized like how that was creating like a really unique life, an experience that was like embedded in that person's mind forever. And then I really enjoyed doing that. I was like, hey, every time you have somebody over to your house like that and pour them a Prohibition era bottle or a friggin' 1960s something that's delicious that they didn't see coming, that sticks with them forever, and that's like a real moment in their life as opposed to just another night drinking. What I mean?
Yeah.
So it's got a lot of layers for me on why I enjoy it so much.
Absolutely.
So Larry, we got your side of the story about, you kind of started bringing these through the restaurant, through your own personal collection and building through there. Same thing I've heard that's kind of how Bar Vetti does it, with Ryan back in Louisville as well. Justin, so kind of, you're a little bit different, because, Larry, when you go to Larry's establishments, they're going to have maybe like 3 or 4 on the menu for tasting, right? Here you've got a whole wall of vintage stuff, right? So kind of talk about, how you started getting all these, and was a lot of it of just the personal collection thing that over time, and you saw the opportunity, you said, this is what's going to happen.
Yeah. So it was mostly just, amassing, just collecting myself and finding multiples of things that I like to drink and selling a couple here to afford to buy a bigger bottle or, kind of doing that kind of stuff. And then, it's kind of I don't know. It's an obsession. You know how it all goes. I mean, you start getting one thing, it's like, okay, I have to have this. Okay, and then the bottle price just keeps going up and up and up, and at some point you're like, all right, I wouldn't spend this much money on anything else. Like, and
I could get a Cadillac.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Your girlfriends are talking about expensive purses. Like, you don't spend $1,000 on a purse, and it's like, wait a minute,
it doesn't even appreciate in value.
I just
doesn't grow 210% in 4 years.
Trade that for 3 purses.
No. So and like Larry's like sharing with friends and stuff, and you just start, all right. So like, what am I going to take, and what am I going to take to the next meetup? It's going to be a bigger bottle. It's kind of like let's open something bigger and bigger and bigger, and then you start just amassing all this stuff, and you get more than you can ever drink, and that's kind of what that is. The wall out there is with JT and I's collection over the years, and stuff that we've picked that we have multiples of to put out there. For other people they want to enjoy, and they can pay and enjoy it.
And so I guess that kind of rolls into my next thing, because you said you've got, and I think at least I can speak for myself too, I've got more bourbon than I could probably enjoy in a lifetime, right? But you've got some real unicorns out there, and I'm sure, Larry, you've got a lot of stuff like that too. I mean, do you feel maybe the bit is like uneasy knowing that you're going to be selling these, and you're not going to have the opportunity to actually try them or keep the bottles for yourself over time, and think like when you're 60 years old, you're like, damn, I should have kept that one, right? Like, what do you have this like almost like a feeling
bourbon regrets
sometimes?
I would have until
you're like, hell no, it's cash straight money.
Well, no, I would have until you started having to write checks to build it out, and to put money into the building and the business, and then you start saying, okay, then it's a little easier to let go when you're writing checks out all the time for even more whiskey and stuff. So it's but most of everything, I'm very, very lucky. Most everything on the wall in there I've tried for the most part. There's very few in there that I haven't. There's a couple weird ones that I just don't have multiples of, so I haven't opened it yet. But for the most part, I've been lucky enough to try most everything out there, and you can definitely tell what my palate goes through is how much stuff is from certain distilleries are out there. And but yes, I mean that's kind of I'll say yes, it is kind of tough to think about letting go of some of these bottles that I worked so hard to find and get, but it isn't when you're writing checks all the time for payroll and everything else. It's a little different.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm with you.
I will say it's a little bittersweet for me, like the whole law, because I've always just like shared them. I've definitely never made money off of vintage whiskey before. Like, I might have traded or sold, but that just meant it was going back into getting more bottles.
Right.
Exactly.
That part's bittersweet, but I do taste every bottle that we sell. Like, we actually do tasting notes on them. So, like, we have 6 bottles open right now purposefully, but we tasted them all. Because, we've all opened an old bottle of whiskey before and been like, oh, it looked great, but it's obviously dead, Yeah. And I've been to bar, and we also, like, vacuum. That's why we only do 6 at a time, is because they're expensive pours. And I will give this little piece of like, I try to build my list to where there's some really inexpensive, like what I call value pours on the list that hopefully are surprising. Like, there's a Sunnybrook on there for $25 a pour, which is pretty inexpensive for a vintage whiskey. Mm-hmm. But it is Sunnybrook, like it's not blended. It's, it's straight bourbon. But, and then we've got a 10 high on there that really surprised me at the price. It's $15 a pour. But then, if it seems really ridiculously priced, it's because I'd rather drink it than sell it.
Fair enough.
But I've been to those bars where they opened a bottle. Someone was willing to pay $200, $300, $400 for the pour. They opened the bottle up, and then I came along 6 years later, and it oxidized. And then I just wanted to try that bottle, and I still paid $400 for an oxidized pour. So I don't want to open 60 bottles at a time. For that reason, I want to go through it, inventory, and I want to be able to control it. And if I lose a bottle, fine, because if I open a bottle up and I overcharge for it because I'd rather drink it, then like I'm going to test that every once in a while. If I decide it's not selling quick enough, I'll just drink it. So it is a little bittersweet in that sense, because like now there is a dollar amount to these bottles. Not that there weren't before, because I obviously paid for them and I know what people are paying for them online, but it's more so now, because now it's not just a bottle I get to open with buddies when they come over.
Right.
It's a bottle that like I'm letting you buy if you want. If you wanted a once in a lifetime experience and you're willing to drop that kind of cash, then cool. If not, get to know me better, and I'll invite you to my house next time.
So,
Why do you think we're here?
yeah, exactly. Let me give you my phone number. No. So how do you manage your inventory from this aspect? So you got, a lot that you had stocked and now you're selling it. Because it's more competitive to get these Dusties now than ever. So how are you keeping up, like stockpiling new to replace the old? How's that process been or changed?
It hadn't changed a ton. We have a lot. We've been, myself and Susie Hoyt, she's the beverage director, but also my better half. We've been buying bottles for well over a decade. And again, like you said, we have more bottles than we could ever drink in a lifetime. And we have thousands of bottles that are like 1990 and back. So I don't really have to be too aggressive right now, because they're not flying off the shelf,
right.
The silver dollar, especially the ones that I don't want to sell because I overprice them. And I'm not saying that overprice is maybe a little bit extreme. Like, we do bar margins,
right?
And I know a lot of people will not do bar margins for it, but it doesn't make a lot of sense for me not to, because people show up, they're going to buy something, And to be fair, if I go into a bar, sometimes I do splurge. If I go into like a Delilah's or, there's a handful of great bars doing vintage whiskey in Chicago now, actually. And sometimes it's like, oh shit, I've never got to try that. And he's got it open. Yeah, it's expensive for one pour, but now I'll know if I want to drop the $2,500 on the bottle,
Right.
So I haven't had to get too aggressive, but I do have that, another one of those regrets, or that bittersweetness is I noticed how many came out of my main cabinet at home whenever I stocked the cabinet at the dollar. And so I did replace some of those because I was, no one else would walk in my house and notice that anything was missing. But I noticed, and every day walking to the espresso machine, I'd be like, man, those aren't in there now.
Right.
So I got a few more that way, but I haven't had to be too aggressive,
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, for us, it's kind of one of those things. They're not flying off the shelf. We're a regular package store as well. We're also doing barrel picks. So our bread and butter is, the taste of bourbon country is what we call it today, with all the releases of today and 150 plus labels of whiskey out there that are available here, but then also barrel picks. But then over here we don't have to, we've got quite a few things back there that we can replace it pretty quickly with. And so somebody asks, well, what happens when you run out? It's like, well, I have a lot of money to go buy some fucking more.
That's right.
That's at the end of the day, that'd be an awful
good
problem, right?
Yeah.
I'd close for 2 weeks and go find some more or whatever.
Right.
It's not too worried about it. I mean, we obviously pay attention, and we, especially with Keeneland and Derby coming around, you stock certain bottles that are going to fall off the shelf, during those times. But for the most part, it's a steady going in and out, just kind of with people coming in trying to sell stuff too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you guys have already kind of led on to the next question of really getting into this of pricing in the target market. So, and let's focus on the the vintage spirits aspect, because we know that you've got other bottles on the shelf, you've got a lot of things on the menu, but when it comes to the vintage spirits, you already kind of talked about, you've got some bottles like Sunnybrook that is a little bit more in the affordable category. I know I've been in there and I've seen a Old Weller antique from the 70s or something that was a $75 price tag or something like that. And then Justin, I know you don't even put sticker prices on some of these, right? Because don't get me wrong, because valuations fluctuate.
Well,
right?
Yeah,
and
exactly. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to sit there and change prices every week. I have a sheet, I have a sheet that I update, sometimes once a week, sometimes every 2 weeks. But at the end of the day, it's replacement cost. It's replacement cost plus whatever I need, as a profit to keep the lights on and the business. So, what can I go replace it for, plus the premium for retail that makes it as a business model, and that's kind of, the pricing, where the pricing comes from. I think a lot of people get confused or maybe a little closed-minded to think that some of these, some of the secondary groups and all that stuff is that true secondary market on these things. I'm here to tell you that is not the case. There's a reason there's people in there buying and selling to other people. It's because those are kind of a wholesale type pricing now, especially in the last 3-4 years. But so it's basically the biggest thing on the pricing is replacement cost, and then plus whatever I need to make a
flood insurance and all the other crap that goes into actually running
liability, payroll.
Your lease.
Hey, I got a business myself. It's not cheap.
Get it. No, it's not, especially with a brick and mortar.
And so where's your, and you each have different target markets, right? So Justin, I'm going to start with you. So right now, what's your target market of really what you're going for this? Because right now what I can see is you can get people in the door, right? They can go and they can see the Bourbon Museum, if you will, right? And then that probably leads to selling something that's on the other shelves. So what's the target market that you're going for? And then what's the target market that is really going for like the vintage spirits, like when you get there?
And what are they looking for?
Shopify's already taken the cash register online, helping millions sell billions around the world. But did you know that Shopify can do the same thing at your retail store? Give your point of sale system a serious upgrade with Shopify. Shopify's point of sale is your command center for your retail store. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify has everything you need to sell in person. And with Shopify, you get a powerhouse selling partner that effortlessly unites your in-person and online sales into one source of truth. Track every sale across your business in one place and know exactly what's in stock. Connect with customers in line and online. Shopify helps you drive store traffic with plug-and-play tools built for marketing campaigns, from TikTok to Instagram and beyond. And get hardware that fits your business. Take payments by smartphone. Transform your tablet into a point-of-sale system or use Shopify's point-of-sale Go mobile device for a battle-tested solution. Plus, Shopify's award-winning 24/7 help is there to support your success every step of the way. Do retail right with Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/bourbon, all lowercase, and go to shopify.com/bourbon to take your retail business to the next level today. Shopify.com/bourbon. If you're anything like me, then you can't get enough about bourbon. And that's why I'm a subscriber to Bourbon Plus magazine. Bourbon Plus is a quarterly publication that tells the stories from the heart of bourbon, the farmers who grow the grain, the distillers who labor over the process, and the people like you and me who raise their glasses to celebrate it all. Subscribe to Bourbon Plus magazine today at bourbonplus.com, that's PLUS.com, and use code PURSUIT at checkout for $5 off your subscription.
Justin, I'm going to start with you. So right now, what's your target market of really what you're going for this? Because, right now what I can see is you can get people in the door, right? They can go and they can see the Bourbon Museum, if you will, right? And then that probably leads to selling something that's on the other shelves. So what's the target market that you're going for? And then what's the target market that is really going for like the vintage spirits, like when you get there?
And what are they looking for?
Yeah, well, everybody, wants, do you have any Pappy or do you have any Weller or stuff like that, which is fine.
It's all in the back.
Which is fine. Yeah. But, our target market is, again, our biggest target is outside of Kentucky. That's the reason this law is so special to us, is people can come in Kentucky and
you mean not DC, right?
Right. Yeah, we can do it here, and DC's great too, but we want to be able to do it here, where the home of bourbon, and people come from all over the world to come here to bourbon. Why can't they get some cool offerings that they couldn't get anywhere else? And that's kind of what we want to do here with that.
Yeah.
We want people to come in and check out the vintage whiskey. That's why it looks like a museum, and those are all for sale, but you can also leave with something, from today, or a barrel pick or something. You can leave with something. There's prices from, $11 to, $20,000. So it's kind of, there's something for everybody. So we try to expand it to where anybody can walk in.
So I guess, you mentioned the House Bill 400 and being able to hopefully ship a lot of these one day. It's going to be very hard to ship some of those things that are sitting in cradles. That's pretty tough. But I'm sure we'll
figure it out.
Yeah, I'll figure it out.
Make it work.
Freight.
Yeah, get a
pallet or something.
Get a Pelican case made for it, right?
We're actually a Pelican dealer, so yeah.
There you go. But when you think about as you said, people coming into Kentucky for bourbon, the one big thing that other people might not recognize is Lexington is very big in horses as well. Mm-hmm. So you've got Keeneland, of course, that's around here. Your horse farms that line Woodford and different distilleries.
Don't forget the Red Mile,
the Red Mile as well.
For those degenerate gamblers, that like carriage horses.
Do you see a lot of those people starting to entering the door? We get picking up the phone for you too?
Absolutely. We've already, Keeneland's right around the corner. We've already gotten the horse crowd in, and we'll have a steady flow of those guys coming in, and especially when people are coming from out of town for this and all their buddies and they like bourbon to bring them here. We've already got that. happening, but that is a certain demographic that we're looking for, and that's definitely happening already, even before Keeneland, especially with Derby. We're 70 miles from Louisville, so
because Airbnb get too expensive in Louisville, so you stay
like here anyways, right?
Bus,
Bus it. And so, Larry, I mean, that kind of goes to the same aspect, right? Horse racing, Kentucky, Derby, Louisville. All of a sudden, there's Pappy on the shelves everywhere, right? At least at the bars and restaurants. So, is that some of the target market you're going for? Like, are you guys really looking to say, like, okay, well, we can help the spirits enthusiast that just lives in Louisville, or are you going for a lot of that foot traffic that comes from tourists?
Well, I think I'm still learning, to be honest, what that is, because I was kind of surprised by some of the folks that were coming in to try the vintage bourbons. Because what I was excited about for this bill was the tourism aspect, because I talked to the tourism bureau a lot, and I talked to the distilleries a lot about it's awesome right now that all these people are coming into town to do bourbon tours and whatnot, but it's not Disneyland. Like, they're not going to bring their kids every year until they turn 18. They're going to do it a few times and be done. So how do you keep bringing them back, So that's an awesome new aspect of that, because as more bars start, utilizing this, and more liquor stores start utilizing it, that inventory will change all the time. So there's another, like, it's just like antique shopping or something. It's like you may not find anything, but you're going to go look because there might be something cool that day or whatnot. But we've sold most of ours either through dinners or through industry folks, and the industry won't stop coming through because bourbon's not going away as far as the popularity goes, and everybody wants to get that education. But a lot of restaurant groups come through, and then they'll buy one of each to taste at the table, like that kind of thing is going on a lot. The chef next door at Red Herring, next door to he comes over and he's always trying like the Tin Highs and the Sunnybrooks, and those value pours I think are more for the locals. Because again, locals didn't grow up with that reverence, like willing to pay $200 or $300 for a pour of whiskey. They're like, that's friggin' stupid. I mean, and I'm not saying it is stupid, because like there's value to that. Like, if, there's other things. Like what I always like to say is I've wasted money on stupider shit than a good pour of whiskey. Yeah. And I've done that myself at other people's bars. I've spent that kind of money on a pour just to have that experience. And didn't, and again, I remember the whiskey, I won't remember the money kind of thing.
Right.
But it's not for everybody. Like everybody, you can't afford to do that 7 days a week, or every time you have a whiskey, which is why we like to offer $3 shots. And that's why we do all the barrel picks, because they're super affordable and equally as unique, to the establishment. But I think we're still learning. I think again, they're not flying off the shelf, like we're doing. It hasn't changed like the purchasing we're doing with the distilleries, which is something they were worried about, I think, at first, which is good for them. That also means this will probably be more of a sustainable thing for everybody. But tourism for sure, and I think Derby's going to be I think we'll fly through a lot more inventory.
Yeah, because this will be your first Derby under the...
And people do drop a lot of money at Derby time. Like, I actually, because of Derby and the surrounding times, because it's not just that weekend you're busy all around it, that's when I started raising my prices on my Van Winkle product, because I would have to get 4 phone calls a day from my managers being like, hey, such and such just wants to buy the whole bottle at ounce price. And I'm like, well, that's because they can't buy that bottle for that price. Because I literally started pricing my Van Winkle at what you would have to pay for the bottle in the secondary market. So people would quit asking, because it's like, well, now you can just get it delivered to your house and leave my manager alone.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I was trying to be way more fair than that. And I was like, well, this isn't working for anybody. So I think we're still learning who all will, and I think it depends on how you price it and what your offerings are on who it attracts. Like, it's definitely not, the work, all the industry folks that hang out at the Silver Dollar and the Pearl aren't going to be dropping $300 on an old Hermitage, but when the restaurant group brings them in from New York or San Francisco, they may all want to try that,
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I have people from out of town come to Kentucky, and they're just like, they love the bourbon trail and doing it all, but they're so disappointed that they can't find all these rare bourbons that they thought they were going to be able to find or experience anything. And now it just kind of gives them that outlet, to experience something unique.
Yeah, like one more thing. Like that was always the thing coming up in the bourbon industry or the bar industry in Louisville that was the first thing an out-of-town person asked is like, what can I have here I can't have anywhere else? And that's gotten fewer and fewer and fewer because of like things getting more allocated, things getting more international as far as distribution goes. And of course, everybody's got like, well, we've got these single barrels, but everybody's got fucking single barrels now. It's like, it's just whether or not you like my palate more than, the guy in Georgia, So this is a nice add to that, I think. I pitched an idea to the Louisville and Kentucky's visitor bureau that we talked all the distilleries into having a small allocation of everything they produced, and then they could do those like the Visa commercials, where it's like so anything that was only produced for Japan or only produced for Australia, all those things would be available somewhere in Kentucky, either by the pour, retail, maybe in a small extent.
Yeah.
And then they could do those ads like, the $1,600 flight hotel to Japan, and it's all right here in Kentucky, and that would give people another reason to come back, but nobody took me up on it.
That's hard. That's hard.
They say they're still talking about it.
That's our number one question when they come in is, what can I find here that I can't find at home? And it's like, that's dwindled down to a couple bottles pretty much.
I do like the fact that the distilleries are starting to do distillery lease onlys. Yeah. I know a lot of people get upset about that because they're like, well, what if I can't make it to the distillery? Well, that's the whole idea, right? It's you have to come to Kentucky and go to the distillery in order to be able to enjoy that. And then we benefit from it. At least I know I do. When people come in town to go to Willett and wait in line to buy what they're putting out, or they go to Heaven Hills Visitor Center and wait in line, they usually end up showing up at the Silver Dollar, at least for dinner, for a few drinks, maybe for brunch,
Yeah.
So we're benefiting from them doing that. Even though they're not allowing me to have those bottles at my bar, we still benefit from them doing that at their distilleries, which I appreciate.
Yeah.
Do you all think you're reaching possibly a new audience, right? Of people that are, they just started collecting Maker's bottles last year, and then they're like, oh man, there's so much out there that I didn't know about. Like, do you think you're also helping in regards of bourbon education to some of these people out there too?
Absolutely. I mean, what we do here, we feel education is, we want to educate as many people as possible, because those are the people later on that's going to be buying more and more bourbon and even now the vintage stuff. So, we think absolutely we're reaching new audience. We bring them in. We can taste them on stuff. We have a sample license as well. But we can taste them on stuff. We can show them history and kind of show them where the bourbon is today, and kind of take them on that path of from our earliest bottle to from 1917 or all the way up through today, and kind of educate them on what they should look for when they're out there dusty hunting or whatever, and maybe they'll come back and sell it to us. But it's cool to see. It's like, oh, my grandpa, I used to have that, old granddad all the time. My grandfather had it, and he didn't have a cradle, but is that like normal? So it's like all those, all those questions and cool things that we get to chat with people, and it does, like, it gives them a throwback, especially if they've experienced it in their past or remember seeing it as a kid around or whatever. So it's cool.
Yeah. What about you, Larry?
Yeah.
Do you think you're doing some of that education too, of like bringing new people that are getting into bourbon and they look at your menu and be like, oh my, I didn't know this stuff existed, right? Like I didn't know I could even possibly try this.
I think yes is the short answer to that now, but I don't know that. I think that in general the audience is growing for bourbon, not necessarily just because they showed up at the Silver Dollar. Because normally by the time they show up at the Silver Dollar, because
because of bourbon.
But maybe they get into other things that they didn't know they liked already. We try to really educate people. Or you're the one tag along that doesn't really drink bourbon. You only drink scotch, or you only drink vodka or whatever it is. Because we've really gone out of our way to train our staff to have like those yeses. Mm-hmm. So they have to know about scotch, and they need to know about Irish whiskey, so they know what to offer whenever somebody says that's all they drink. Like you're obviously not going to offer somebody, like what's a good example? Like an Ancient Age, if they normally drink like an Isle Scotch, like a super peaty Scotch. So we, like in that scenario, we actually offer them like a Mezcal Old Fashioned, because you add a little bit of dim and some bitters for the dry notes to a Mezcal, and it tastes similar to a really super peaty Scotch. But if they like Johnny Walker, if it's a blended whiskey, then there's we have 40 whiskeys that we could offer you that you're probably going to love. One of the things before it started getting really popular, and like Irish whiskey was still really big, and it's starting to have a surgence again. But if someone ever ordered Redbreast, I knew they liked bourbon. They just didn't know it yet.
Oh yeah.
But that didn't necessarily mean they liked bourbon if they liked Jameson. It might be a little harder to get them into bourbon. But in general, the audience is really growing. Like the age has really gotten younger. Like people weren't drinking the way they were at 21, 22, 23 years old. Like we get a lot more of them in now than we did when we first opened the doors, even 7 years ago, you know. And then also females, obviously, a lot.
Yeah.
Like
That's what I was about to say. Because at Silver Dollar, you only offer, I believe, tequila, mezcal, and bourbon, right? And
well, we offer everything, but we only have
And Lone Star.
and Lone Star, yeah.
We only have one rum, one tequila, and one vodka.
Okay.
And then we have several agave and several bourbons.
Well, story for you. My wife despises bourbon. She hates it. But anyways, we go to Silver Dollar a couple times a month, and there's a drink in the brunch menu. I think it's Old Fitz with honey and lemon. Can't remember the name
Gold
of
Rush.
it. Yes, Gold Rush. And she tried that, and she was like, "Wow, this is bourbon. I didn't know bourbon could taste like this." You know?
Well, that's another way to do it too, is with to enter people into that is with cocktails. You know, if maybe like just the straight spirit's too much for them, and not too much is the wrong word. It's just not what they're used to. It's abrasive, maybe.
Right.
Then introducing them through cocktails is a great way, because we very purposefully are spirit forward in our cocktails. So you still know that there's bourbon in there. We're not hiding it with a bunch of cloying stuff. You know, we're not making it over sweet, and you're not missing the spirit in it, you know, especially when it's something non-vodka, right? Something that needs to be like embraced. So if she gets used to that aftertaste of the Old Fitz after drinking the Gold Rushes, then when she goes and sips on an Old Fitz, it's like a positive memory, not a negative memory now.
Right, exactly.
So I guess accidentally sometimes we're getting people
Getting new to yeah.
You know, kind of thinking of funny stories. We had somebody else that came on and kind of said something funny too, and I kind of want to get your all's take. You know, we're not talking vintage whiskey of like Willet 5 years ago. We're talking like 70s, 80s, like old granddad and stuff like that. And he goes, it's funny that all of us were chasing after this old granddad, these Dusties, these National Distillers, this old Stitzel Weller that used to sit on the shelves. And you go talk to somebody that's 60, 70 years old, and they're like, "Oh, that shit's rock good." Like, who wouldn't even drink that back then? Like, you think that's hilarious that, like,
I was telling the story.
Things are changing like that.
Yeah, I was telling the story on the way here. My grandfather's, he had a pretty big bourbon collection, but there was like a box in the corner, and there was a box of old granddads from there. And I was like, "Do you know what you have?" And he's like, "That stuff's crap. What are you talking about? I would never drink that." You know, I was like, "Do you know what you have here?"
It's funny. We hear that. I hear that a lot. Where people are like, this stuff's awful. Oh, Fizz, what is this? I'm like, well, I mean, have you tried it? Like, recently? Like, I mean, I don't. Compared to some of the other stuff now, I was like, but that happens more often than not, and it is pretty funny to see.
I think it really shows like how much marketing plays a key to it. Because when people were buying the old granddad or the Old Fitz, because definitely in the 80s and 90s, those were super inexpensive. Kind of definitely the working man or less kind of bourbon or whiskey pours, we should say, because like fine whiskey with scotch. That's what it was, and that's what you related value and prestige to. And so the guy buying the Old Fitz or buying the old granddad was shooting it or mixing it with Coke. Like they weren't sitting there and like letting it air and nosing it and then like taking tasting notes and realizing the different nuances.
They didn't notice marzipan, in the Old Fitz.
But if you don't take time to appreciate something, you're not going to appreciate it. You know what I mean? Like I said before, how I didn't have that aha moment. Like I used to not sit down. Like I didn't order, even in my early 20s, and hell, in my early 30s, even I wasn't like ordering an old granddad to smell and take tasting notes on. I was ordering it with a Budweiser
to get drunk.
So it's perception. It's like how it's just like if like eating chicken livers, from one place or eating veal liver from another. They're just liver, but you put a different weight of value on those two things.
Yeah.
And so, Larry, you had mentioned something about this stuff not flying off the shelves, and you're pricing it accordingly to make sure it necessarily doesn't do that. Do you want it to fly off the shelves? Like, would you be okay if all of a sudden, like, it's like Justin, you said it a lot of times replacement cost. Or would you be okay with it if you saw this good steady churn of stuff that's going out?
I mean, I'd be okay with it, sure, but I don't think that's a problem I'm going to run into, to be fair. Like at our place, at least, because we've got so many like more approachable price points on our back bar that are delicious bourbon, right? So I don't see that ever really becoming a problem because of the stock we have vintage wise. There are certain bottles that I would hate to see just fly off the shelf, if that makes sense. Because there's some that I just don't know that I'll ever be able to replace, at least not the same quality, like stored the same way. That just like kind of like that old Hermitage. I had 2 of those, and I drank one way faster than I expected to, and then saved a second one to put into because I knew this law was coming. And that one bothers me a little bit if it goes too fast because it's such delicious and that's the thing. I do remember when I get these bottles. I remember going to upstate New York to buy it, and meeting up with my buddy and opening that first one and sitting by the lake and friggin' drinking it. Like I won't ever forget that when that bottle's gone. Like that memory will get more and more faded.
Right.
So yes and no. Like as a whole, it'd be a great problem to have. Right, that people were buying them so fast that I was worried about how to replace them. But individual bottles are different. Individual bottles I might have a little bit more of an emotional, romantic attachment to. So
absolutely.
What about you, Justin? I mean, would you be okay if things you go out there, you've got, I don't know, like 5 or 6 Happy 23s of gold wax. You've got some other off the wall Van Winkles. You've got stuff sitting in cradles out there. Like if all of a sudden, like some guy comes in tomorrow and says, yeah, sure, I'll take it all. Like, are you like, all right, well, let's make it happen?
He's going on vacation.
Yeah, I mean, yes, it would kind of be sad to see those leave or whatever. But at the end of the day, most of that stuff's replaceable. I mean, like I said, it's priced for replacement costs, and yes, it is romantic a little bit. Having these here in the history, but at the end of the day, it's replaceable. I mean, we it's
another bottle of whiskey.
It would be an awful problem to have, first world problems, right? Selling too much whiskey. But it is cool.
Too much expensive whiskey.
Yeah. So it'd be fun to see people getting into it and being able to find the unicorn. Like I remember when I found bottles, like the 101 proof Old Tailor out there. When I found the first one, I was like, okay, that's awesome. And I probably paid what at the time was too much for it. But now it's I want to give somebody else that experience and be able to find their unicorn. There's a whole wall of unicorns, for some people. So it's in a way, yes and no.
And so, you talk about replacement costs a lot, but at some point there has to be an end to them because these are, you can't find them anymore, right? Or they're just not available. I mean, Larry, I'm not even going to ask because you have 1,000 bottles, but Justin, is there an end in sight? At the point where you get rid of a bottle, you sell a bottle, be like, that's it. I don't think I'll be able to find another one.
I don't think so. I mean, there's very few bottles that I think that is the case for, and it's I just don't think that's a in the future, in the near future right now. I mean, there's still a lot of stuff out there. So there's still a lot of stuff out there, and with this law, more stuff's coming out. We've had bottles. I've had almost every day somebody comes in with something. I mean, we found half a case of 1919 Bond of Lillard that somebody brought in. I mean, that stuff's happening. We've been open, at this recording 7 weeks. So I mean, it's more and more stuff is coming out of the woodwork, and that's what we thought would happen. I think is
I get contacted way more now than I used to.
Yeah. I mean, are you having to go and crawl in basements or anything yet, or people are just bringing it to your storefront?
That happens a lot less nowadays anyway. That's how I started looking.
The chase is a little easier now.
But the price is more.
Right.
Which, I guess time's worth something, right? Because I used to spend hundreds of hours to find handfuls of bottles, but now you can spend hundreds of hours to find none, because everybody's doing that same thing. But I get contacted regularly now. I've always gotten contacted some because of the silver dollar. People would assume that someone there might want something they found in their attic or whatever. And but now that they know the laws out there, I get emails from different states even, and but everybody's pretty savvy. They're looking for roughly what it would sell for if I just went out and looked for it myself from another collector. It's not like people are they're not yard sale finds anymore.
Right.
And we've gotten contact from 2 different people from Europe. I mean, it's crazy about Italy, and hey, I've got all these Dusties, and it was a bunch of stuff from the 60s and 70s.
It seems like in Italy nobody drink bourbon. It's
right. I know, right? So it's but I mean that's just it's happening. It's happened a ton since we've been
in
Japan.
So. I got it from guys, but they've already gone out. Those guys know just like we do that. Probably 10 years ago, or maybe less. 10 years ago in the States, you could still find stuff in liquor stores, but 5 years ago you couldn't anymore. It started getting kind of harder. And you could still find them in like Japan and Italy and Spain, in Paris. But now that's not, because those guys know too. They're in our groups, and they're, and they're on all the whiskey pages and stuff too. They know. But now they'll reach out and they don't mind shipping internationally.
All right, so that's today. What's your best like whiskey dusting hunting story that you've had maybe previously? I'll let whoever wants to take it.
Go ahead.
Got a good story.
I think I ran into a guy.
Or like a huge score, whatever it is.
I ran into a guy one time at a bar, just sitting drinking, and he's like, "Oh, you're a bourbon guy." I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Well, I got some bourbon." I was like, "Oh boy, here we go." Here we go. And he pulled out some pictures, and it was it was like a case of 15-year very old Fitz and like 18-year and some crazy stuff. I'm like, whoa. He's like, yeah, my dad was a distributor, up in Chicago, and he's been sitting in the basement. And I was like, okay. And I was like, let's go look at him. So we left the bar and went and looked at him. I ended up with quite a few of them, brought them back. But it's that was just random. At a bar drinking, just being a nice guy, I guess.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so
I've never had anybody just walk up and drop like bricks.
Yeah. My laps in your lap.
But I have had good times.
Karma, I guess.
So I used to drive, once I really got into hunting whiskey, I stopped flying if I was going anywhere in the States, and I would drive, and I would always try to take different routes. And like one trip I went to Kansas, it took me 7 days, because I just didn't get on the highway, and I hit every little liquor store, in either like urban areas, like outside of the major, spots, or super rural. Like what I always say is, you just don't want people with good inventory control. That's what you're looking for. You're looking for places that are like mom and pop shops, or like they just sell the 200 milliliter Everclears at the counter most of the time, and all their stuff is collecting dust otherwise. But one of the best finds we had, and it was really surprising, I was coming back from like the Florida area, and I was just north of Atlanta and on the back roads, and we were hitting liquor stores I'd found online, but happened to pass one that like wasn't on Google or Yelp or any of that stuff. In a pretty bad neighborhood, but in the parking lot had become like, you could tell like the neighborhood hangout, it was like people had their chairs set up, and, everyone was just kind of hanging out. And I went in, and, there was a few tack strips on the shelf. Like I call them handshakes. I probably have 100 DeKuyper bottles. You hear about the guys who always buy a Bud Light when they go into like the ghetto stores because they don't want to just walk in and walk back out.
Yeah.
If I find a tack strip, I walk up to the counter with it, so that way I can start a conversation, right? I'm never going to drink these, 1970s sugar bombs, but it started a lot of conversations for me. In this place particular, it wasn't DeKuyper that I found, but it was like a Benchmark, which is delicious, from the 70s and 80s. And there was a couple other things that were from the same time period. So I just started grabbing them and taking them up to the counter, and the owner saw what I was doing. So he had the guy working with him go to the back room, and he was literally coming out with a grocery cart with old stuff. And some of it was like stuff you just don't really want. So, but I was pulling out what I wanted, putting it on the shelf and doing that. And he realized I was pretty much taking every whiskey that, he was bringing out to me. So he's finally like, you just want to go to the back? And this place was like, there was no inventory control. It was every bit of 2,000 square foot, and like a bunch of the modern stuff stacked up front, and then just stacks and stacks of boxes that and the top ones were pretty new, but the bottom ones weren't. I ended up finding about 11 and a half cases of 70s, 80s bourbon that was still tagged from that price. Like the tags were from the 70s and 80s. Wow. And I think I spent like the whole, 11 and a half cases in the back of my SUV. And the bill was $678.
Oh my God. Did you turn back home?
The dude was stoked. I didn't have any more room. I came back home. Yeah. But
I'm going to go get a U-Haul real quick.
But the dude was super stoked, right? That was a big sale that day for him. And I was obviously, and this was 6 or 7 years ago. So things weren't worth what they're worth now.
Yeah.
But to put it in perspective, when I got home, I sold 2 bottles of the Rebel Yell I got for $3.50 a pop to pay for the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And you know what they go for now. It's not $3.50 anymore. Right. So that's about how long. But I always still felt good. I was like, I sold 2 bottles, kept 11 cases. Yeah. You know what I mean? And it was a wash for me, other than hotels and gas,
Yeah.
But that was probably the biggest find. I've had times where I've left with not in 7 or 8 years, but where I left with 2 or 3 cases. But that was definitely the holy shit, I'm out of room now. It's time to go home.
Got to go home.
Yeah.
That's a good story.
Yeah, that's great.
So while we start wrapping this up, I kind of want to get your ideas on, first, it doesn't sound like it's a smart idea to somebody say, like, I'm going to open up something that just sells vintage whiskey and like that's it, right? I mean, it's got to be something that is supplemental
an add-on
to the core business, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't. It's not a sustainable business. Somebody might be able to do it, but they won't. I don't think would be open very long. Selling just vintage whiskey. It's definitely got to be an addition. You have to find a niche outside of that, and we use vintage whiskey to bring people in and sell other things. If we sell vintage whiskey, great, but it's to sell the other stuff as well. But yeah, I don't think that's a sustainable business model. Just vintage.
They got a ton of L8 here.
Yeah, right.
Yes. LA, as soon as you mention Bourbon Pursuit. That's right.
Yeah, I agree. Like, it hasn't changed our purchasing or our sales really in a huge way, but it is a great, it's a marketing tool really at this point. Like, everybody that walks in now takes a photo of the case and puts it on Instagram, puts it on Facebook, whatever, which is awesome for us. And I feel like they think that's a really special experience too, because these aren't people who have a bunch of bottles at home. They're not people like us who've always kind of been in that market. So they get to see a glimpse into that world. They think it's awesome. I think that it could be a sustainable business for people if you have like a web presence and international shipping.
Absolutely.
You'd have to have an international presence, because there are places like in London doing that make a ridiculous living doing it. And if you wanted to go, and there are a few bars, like I don't know if anybody's ever been to the Milk Room in Chicago, where all they do is old classic style cocktails. Now it only seats 8 people, and they're not trying to take a ton of money because it's off the Chicago Athletic Club, which is like they're cranking all day. But it's a great thing. You can go in there. You're going to spend a little bit to drink a 1940s Manhattan, but it actually has vermouth from the 40s and bitters from the 40s and whiskey from the 40s. But we call those flagships in the business. It's like, hey, look, I can do this really awesome thing. It's not going to make us any money, but it'll get people to show up at all the places that make money. Right. But there's a lot of ways I think that we can all benefit, and the guest can benefit, or the consumer can benefit from the law for sure. Kentucky as a whole should benefit greatly from it, as long as we really control it and do it in a way that makes sense for us and the distributors and the distillers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Other than shipping, which House Bill 400, by the time this recording goes out, is probably going to be passed because it went through flying colors in the House and now it's going to the Senate. What else? Is there anything else that you would like to see changed or expect the future of this to help grow the vintage whiskey experience or presence in Kentucky? Or do you think,
or just bourbon industry in general?
Or are we just status quo right now?
I mean, for us, it's definitely online, being able to do it online and be an international presence. But that's definitely down the road what we would hope for as a package store, and that it's a little different, for a bar or a restaurant. But that's kind of what we would like to see, to be able to really take this to another level. But we're happy with House Bill 100. We're going to be happy we're ecstatic with House Bill 400. If that's the only place it goes, then we're still thrilled.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, I don't know how much more the bourbon, like right now, I don't know how much more the bourbon and how much more enthusiasm the bourbon industry can handle, because like we're still waiting on everything to catch up as far as aging processes go. So we get our 12 years back and we get all those things back. So like, maybe it's okay to like
baby steps.
Yeah,
a little bit.
Well, not even baby steps. But you know how it is. Like you get super excited about something, and then you just wear it out, and then all of a sudden you're bored with it. You move on, and all the great stuff comes back. Like I think that having a little bit of a governor on it is okay right now. Which aging caused us all to have a governor anyway.
Right.
There's some pretty spectacular whiskey coming out still today. Like as much as we all love the vintage whiskey, like I'm not sure there's ever been a more golden age of bourbon, completely at least than right now. It's never been as like internationally coveted or loved as it is right now. And I think the quality is great that's coming out as well. Even our low end bourbons are really delicious. It's just we're comparing them to the really high end bourbons, so they don't seem like it. That's my take on it. But
that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, guys, I think that's gonna be the way we're gonna wrap this up. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. I want you to be able to just give your establishments one more plug. Larry. Start with you first. Kind of just talk about where people can find your establishments if they want to get in contact with you. How could they do that as well?
The Silver Dollar in the Pearl of Germantown. The Pearl is a neighborhood bar. We don't actually have a website. We have a Facebook page, and that's it. But the Silver Dollar, the website's whiskeybythedrink.com. Come check us out when you're in Louisville.
Yeah, awesome. Justin?
And, so Justin's House of Bourbon is downtown Lexington. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram. And we have a website, thehouseofbourbon.com. And then gobourbon.com is the Bourbon Reviews website. And we have social media for it as well.
Awesome.
So come see us.
Well, awesome. So everybody, make sure you're following them on social media. Go get a drink at Larry's. Come give the code word to Justin. He might bring you back here in the tasting room. Who knows what can happen, right?
Get one of those barrel picks. Get
a barrel pick while you're here, right? You can't complain too much, but make sure you go and check out their places. Make sure you're following Bourbon Pursuit on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Bourbon Pursuit. If you do like what you hear, make sure you support the show on Patreon, patreon.com/Bourbon Pursuit.
And thanks, guys, for coming on, spending time with us.
Thanks for having us, guys. Thanks for coming down Lexington.
Yeah. And if anybody has suggestions, feedback, comments, we love hearing from our listeners to give us ideas so we can keep bringing content to you. And we'll see you next time.